In this video, I invited all of my friends to compete in a 1v1 Dead by Daylight competition. And this is how it all unfolded. But before we get into the games, we need to go over the rules. At the start of every set, both players will ban 2 killers for one another. No repeat killers are allowed. At the start of every game, both players will ban 2 out of the 5 following maps. The player with the longest chase time gains a point, with each set being a best of 5. Killers are only allowed to use 1 of the following perks listed below, while survivors are only allowed to use 2 of the following 6 perks listed below. Killers aren't allowed add-ons, while survivors aren't allowed items. Every game starts at Shack, and lastly, the winner of the tournament gets 20 smackaroons. With that all said, make sure to like the video if you enjoy it and subscribe if you haven't already. Now let's start with game 1. For our first matchup, we have Aaliyah vs Scott. Scott chose to ban Wraith and Huntress for Aaliyah, while Aaliyah chose to ban Springtrap and Hillbilly for Scott. They both decided to go to Cowshed first, with Scott going Killer first using Doctor, and Aaliyah chose Life and Windows of Opportunity for her 2 perks. A common theme you'll see in all these sets is that all the survivors just decide to pre-drop Shack pallet and just leave Shack. Aaliyah does so by vaulting over the pallet and using Life to run somewhere else. Something about these 2 players is that these 2 players have the least amount of hours in the game compared to everyone else, but they practice a lot before this tournament. Unfortunately for Scott though, he mains Springtrap, which Aaliyah banned for him. Scott takes a long way around a hay bale, but maybe that's part of his strategy. After running around this loop long enough, Aaliyah gets shocked and decides to look for a better pallet. She does just that and finds a really good loop. It takes Scott a minute to realise how good this loop really is, so he decides to back up a bit and break the pallet at a perfect time, with Aaliyah being very close. Despite Scott being close, another pallet was closer. I think this was Scott's second time ever playing Doctor, so playing him in a tournament is brave to say the least. Scott remembers that Doctor has a parrot and uses it, and Aaliyah just decides to go for another pallet. Shocking. Oh, no pun intended. Oh my days. Scott doesn't break this pallet because even he knows that this pallet sucks. Aaliyah takes this loop a little too wide, letting Scott get his first hit. Aaliyah uses his time to look for another pallet. After throwing another pallet down, Scott spanks the pallet in the bottom because it was being such a bad boy. He then misses a swing, mainly because he prefers swinging at pallets' bottoms. It doesn't take long for Scott to eventually close the gap with Aaliyah. Aaliyah's final time being 1 minute and 56 seconds. They both decide to go Cowshed again, with Aaliyah going Springtrap. Now Scott's trying to do Aaliyah's technique of pre-dropping Shack pallet and just leaving Shack. It doesn't take Aaliyah long to catch up during Scott's nice stroll around the park and gets an early hit. Thankfully it wasn't an axe throw that got him. Scott has quite a lot of close calls, but it's like he always says, you can't keep a good ginger down. Trust me, he actually says that. Don't ask him though. Aaliyah tries to harvest some hay bales, but she remembers she's playing Dead by Daylight and not Minecraft, and gets hit by a pallet over the head, giving Scott a lot of distance. Unfortunately for Scott, he makes a bad fall over a pallet and gets himself killed, and that leaves Scott with a time of 1 minute and 35 seconds. Moving on to the next game, Aaliyah now can't play Springtrap, while Scott cannot play Doctor again. They both decide to mix things up a little bit and go Cowshed for once, and Scott goes Wraith, I guess. Unlike Aaliyah's first Survivor game, she doesn't pop her life straight away, which is smart to try and keep it later on in the chase. Because of that, it's easier for Scott to catch up, but also because he's Wraith and Wraith is very fast and gets his first hit very early. Aaliyah uses her life right after but gets no value from it. This could be a very easy game for I'm at a serious loss for words right now. After that fumble from Scott, Scott finally finds Aaliyah again at the side of the map. He tries to go for a cheeky swing around the pallet, but Aaliyah throws it down in time and gets a stun. She then holds W key to find another pallet thanks to Windows of Opportunity. She pre-dropped this pallet because she doesn't want another close call. But unfortunately, Aaliyah not knowing what side Scott's gonna take gets herself killed, with Aaliyah getting 1 minute and 13 seconds on the timer. For Aaliyah's next killer game, she decides to go with Chucky, which is the killer that looks the most like her, and of course to go Cowshed again. It doesn't take long for Scott to run into Aaliyah, giving her her first hit very early. What's scarier than a short ginger is a short ginger playing as another short ginger in a game. Unfortunately for Scott, he cannot find any windows or pallets to save his life, with the chase being 50 seconds long. Here's the updated score, with Aaliyah no longer being allowed to play Chucky and Scott not being allowed to play Wraith anymore. As they go to Cowshed again, it shows that Scott is running out of killer supply as he chose Trapper, who isn't that good of a killer to choose in a 1v1. The only world that Trapper is a good pick in a Dead by Daylight 1v1 competition is that he places a trap near a pallet, get Aaliyah to run in it, and get a very quick time. Unfortunately for Scott though, in this 1v1 tournament, you have no time to place traps whatsoever. He barely misses this swing over pallet and tries to play this loop. Now Scott is full send in his chase, which means he's not even using Trapper's power, which is a good idea since Trapper's power takes so long to set up, but on the other hand, you're playing a killer with no power, which puts you in a massive disadvantage, which pretty much goes without saying. Aaliyah then makes it to a really good pallet with Scott right behind her. She then takes this loop kinda wide, and then walks around this corner and does a 360. But little does she know, there's no style points in this tournament, because I'd outstyle everyone and win. Aaliyah makes a bad vault and gets hit, and it doesn't take long for her to do it again, with Aaliyah's chase being 1 minute and 39 seconds. For the next match, Aaliyah chooses to go Pyramid Head simply because she thirsts over him, I don't see the appeal, and they both decide to go Cowshed again. Scott pre-drops Shack Pallet and leaves. It didn't take long for Aaliyah to find Scott in the corner of the map. He makes good use of this really bad pallet, falls over it just in time, getting Aaliyah to swing. Scott then runs over to another pallet, throws it down just in time, but then gets full box, runs back to the pallet and gets hit, using a speed boost to go elsewhere. Unfortunately for Scott, he makes a bad play, with Scott getting a chase of 1 minute on the dot. After that match, Pyramid Head and Trapper were used, but it no longer matters now that Aaliyah has won the full set. Moving on to our next set, we have Callum versus Natasha. Going into this match, Natasha banned Doctor and Ghoul for Callum, while Callum banned Nurse and Huntress for Natasha. So for Natasha's first killer pick, she goes with Skull Merchant, and they both agreed to go on Cowshed. Unlike Aaliyah and Scott, Callum is actually using Shack during this chase, but unfortunately he gets hit before he can even pull the pallet down. Now instead of looping around Shack, Callum decides to run into the corner because, I don't know, with Callum's chase being 19 seconds. They both run it back on Cowshed for Callum's killer game, and we're spectating Callum on killer, not because I forgot to switch on Survivor, but because I want to. Natasha misses a pallet stun, and Callum gives Natasha a warning shot. Callum pretends to commit to the chase, but then turns around and breaks a pallet. Natasha then runs in for a hug and realizes that Callum's a killer. Callum remembers his Rainbow Six Siege skills with his aim, and he completely misses the generator with the axe. Natasha then takes a chase to, what is this, a digger? Wait, I actually don't know what this is. Am I right? Is it a digger? I'll ask Scott, he's a farmer. Callum then remembers that he's not trusted on heavy machinery after he crashes his car in the bush and leaves the big machine. He then tries his luck at throwing another hatchet and misses. He only had 3 hatchets left, or else he has to go in a locker and waste a lot of time. After missing another hatchet, Natasha then gets a pallet stun. He then vaults the window and catches Natasha by surprise, with Natasha's chase being 1 minute and 18 seconds. That's 1-0 for Natasha, but Natasha can no longer play Skull Merchant, with Callum no longer being able to play Huntress. Natasha uses Night, and they go back to Cowshed. Callum gets a very early pallet stun at Shack, but didn't really make much distance. He then gets detected by Night's NPC. He tries to use Light to get away from the NPC, but not only is the NPC right there, but also Natasha is, with her getting a very early hit. He then finds a very safe pallet with Natasha right behind him. Then he sees Natasha use her power, tries to run away from it, but doesn't even realise how close Natasha really is, with Callum's chase ending in 57 seconds. For Callum's next killer pick, he chooses Nurse, and they both run it back on Cowshed. It doesn't take long for Natasha to use Lithe to leave Shack and hit Callum with a random pallet. Now this whole part of the chase, Callum kind of forgets that Nurse has a power and decides to go for a chase with the most slowest character. It doesn't take long for him to actually remember Nurse's power and go for a blink. Callum gets a good blink but barely misses the swing and gets stunned. After minding her own business, Natasha walks into Callum kissing a hay bale. Disgusting! Callum finally finds Natasha again, but Natasha misses a pallet stun, and Callum slaps a hay bale. What is with this guy and hay bales? Callum can't let Natasha go, knowing his hay bale secret. After waiting on a pallet, Natasha misses the pallet stun, and Callum finally gets his first hit. After getting hit, Natasha uses life again now that she's not exhausted anymore. Callum uses his blight to catch up. Natasha then misses a pallet stun, and Callum slaps the pallet on the bottom. Must be a kink I'm not getting here. I mean, Callum is into weird stuff. After running away from a pallet, they both admire a very nice fence. She then misses a stun and gets stunned, with Natasha's time being 3 minutes and 25 seconds. And here's the updated score and band list, with Natasha no longer allowed to play Knight and Callum no longer allowed to play Nurse, thankfully. Natasha goes with Doctor, and they both agree that their last 2 games are just going to be on Cowshed. I'm not forcing them on this map, you have to believe me. Natasha breaks Shack pallet, and after she does so, Callum tries to look for another pallet. He tries to pull this one down, but tries way too late. Unfortunately, it doesn't take long for him to get hit again, ending Callum's chase in 22 seconds. This is Callum's final chance to redeem himself. If he loses this game, he's out of the tournament. And it seems like he's trying to insta-down Natasha with Hellbilly. Natasha starts admiring these barrels, and Callum hits one with his chainsaw. How mean. Now Callum does not want to be at Cowtree at all, not because it's bad for his lipping game, but also because it reminds him of his ex. Unfortunately for Callum, he can't really use Hellbilly's chainsaw around these corners, so he's forced to kinda just lip around with no power. Luckily, he manages to close the gap between him and Natasha, with no chainsaw needed. Callum waits at the other end of the window and gets a hit on Natasha, making her run elsewhere. Natasha patiently waits at a pallet for Callum, then gets the stun, barely hitting his shoulder. While Natasha was making distance, the hook looked at Callum the wrong way, so Callum hit it with his chainsaw. Don't know why the pallet was used. Natasha tries to pull a Hanson Squidward on Callum, but you have to use a door for that, not a pallet, so Hellbilly's face doesn't change. She then tries to wait for Callum's next move. Natasha tries booking it for this dropped pallet, but unfortunately gets hit trying to vault it, having Natasha's chase with 2 minutes and 25 seconds. Hellbilly and Doctor would have been the next band for one another, but it doesn't matter now that Natasha has won her last game. Now moving on to our next match, we have Zaid versus Abigail. Abigail chose to ban Pyramid Head and Knight for Zaid, while Zaid chose to ban Knight and Ghoul for Abigail. Zaid goes killer first, choosing Springtrap, and we finally get to see a different map other than Cowshed. Abigail and Zaid are a couple, so they both know each other's playstyle pretty well. Abigail brought life to this game and she tries to use it on the window, but Springtrap's axe hits her on the way out. She then makes it to a pretty small loop with Zaid right behind her. Unfortunately for Abigail though, Zaid can use his axe over pallets. Abigail's chase ending in 31 seconds. They run it back on Dead Dog with Abigail choosing Xenomorph. Instead of using Shack to loop, Zaid decides to make his way to the saloon, which is a pretty good choice. Saving life to lip around saloon as well is also a really good idea. He then slows down to make Abigail catch up, and then he uses his life upstairs on the window. After having good value with life, he then leaves saloon for a very small loop, which isn't somewhere you want to be with Xenomorph's tail. Zaid waits at this pallet trying to get a pallet stun on Abigail, but unfortunately this loop is just awful and he messes up the pallet stun and gives Abigail her first hit. Zaid then makes his way back to Saloon's window, with Abigail right behind him going to use Bamboozle. After a few seconds, Abigail manages to catch up with Zaid, with no pallets or windows close enough for Zaid to use, with Zaid's chase being 1 minute and 20 seconds. Going into the next match, Zaid isn't allowed to play Springtrap and Abigail isn't allowed to play Xenomorph as well as their other bands. They go back to Dead Dog, and for Zaid's next killer game, he decides to pick Singularity, his main. Funny enough, the customization Zaid chose for Singularity was supposed to have a smiley face on it, which was added shortly after this game. Abigail chose not to take the chase into Saloon or to keep it in shack. She decided to take him over near the windmill, then uses her life on this window to make distance near in front of the saloon. Abigail most likely knew about Zaid's main being Singularity, so it's interesting that she didn't ban it for him. After Zaid broke this pallet, there wasn't really many good pallets or windows nearby, which unfortunately for Abigail caused her to get hit. This side of Dead Dog isn't really ideal to be at, because there's not really much to use. Zaid kind of loses Abigail here, then just pulls up from a corner. This would have been a very easy down for Zaid, but Zaid misses the swing, letting Abigail pull down a pallet. She then uses the pallet to make as much distance as she can away from Zaid. Unfortunately for Abigail, Zaid is just way too close to she just broke his ankles. Oh my. Do not expect anything that cool in my games. Spinning Zaid gave Abigail so much more time to milk from this game. But with Zaid being right behind her, it was only a matter of time that Zaid got the down. Abigail's chase being 1 minute and 22 seconds. For Abigail's next killer game, they both decided to go Dead Dog again, and Abigail decided to go with Vecna. Unlike other players in this tournament, Zaid decides to not use his life straight away at Shack, but instead he decides to wait for Abigail to use Vecna's flight power and then use it straight when Vecna's flight is no longer available, forcing Abigail to chase him normally. Thankfully for Abigail though, that was just one out of hundreds of Vecna's parts. Then she uses the pick up purple hand pallet ability, I am not calling it by its name, just for Zaid to pull it back down and Abigail missing a swing. I always thought this side of Dead Dog was always really bad, but Zaid and Abigail has proven it to be pretty valuable. While running back to Shack, Abigail has better lining than Zaid and gets her first hit, forcing Zaid out of Shack immediately. He then makes it to another pallet near the corner of the map and just barely avoids getting hit and gets a pallet stun. After looping Abigail around Saloon for a few more seconds, Zaid decides to leave Saloon and go outside. Then he sees that he's already used quite a lot outside and tries to W key for a pallet far away. After throwing down a pallet, Zaid tries to get revenge on Abigail for spinning him last match but fails, with Zaid's chase being 2 minutes and 5 seconds. The second round goes to Zaid, with Zaid no longer allowed to use Singularity and Abigail no longer allowed to use Vecna. For round 3 they decide to go Coal Tower, with Zaid choosing Dredge as his killer, and Abigail immediately leaves Shack. Abigail takes Zaid somewhere with no lockers in sight, but that doesn't mean Zaid can't use his other power, but he misses the 50-50 and Abigail uses her life. She then tries to get a pallet stun but misses the stun, and Zaid catches up so fast and gets his first hit. Abigail then holds W key to try and reach a pallet very far away from her, with Zaid being right behind her. She thankfully makes it to the lip, but unfortunately for her, Zaid teleports back and catches Abigail by surprise, ending Abigail's chase with 44 seconds. They decide to go back to Coal Tower, with this potentially being Abigail's last game if she loses. Thankfully, she pulled out the big guns and she is using Naughty Bear. Thank God she is not using Trapper, she learned from Scott's mistakes. Since Naughty Bear is so OP, Abigail's given Zaid a chance, since also because they're a couple, so she doesn't want to destroy his ego right now. So she's letting him off. Zaid then tries to 360 Abigail, but that doesn't work on Naughty Bear, it just never does. Zaid absolutely fighting for his life against Naughty Bear, because he's the best character in the game, gets a pallet stun and gets plenty of distance. He's gonna need it, because, you know, this is an S tier killer we're talking about. A few minutes go by and Zaid finds another pallet and gets another pallet stun. Abigail decides to lock in and end the game. She then unsurprisingly gets the down, ending the set with Zaid getting 3 minutes and 1 second. Zaid takes the last match and moves on into the bracket, with Dredge and Trapper being the last two killers used. Our next set is Pinocchio vs Blaine. Blaine decides to ban no one for Pinocchio, while Pinocchio chooses to ban Ghoul and Knight for Blaine. For game 1 they go to Cowshed, and Blaine chooses Plague, which is actually ironic because Plague vomits a lot, and that's what people do when they see Pinocchio. Now, Pinocchio doesn't really play Dead by Daylight that much, so hopefully he can pull off something cool. Unfortunately for him though, he makes his way into a corner which allows Blaine to just completely violate Pinocchio with his vomit. It goes without saying, but Blaine is very confident that he's going to win this set. After all, he didn't ban anyone for Pinocchio. Speaking of Pinocchio, he eventually gets injured from the sickness. He then runs away from the small lip, runs past Shaq, but Blaine eventually catches up, with Pinocchio getting a time of 53 seconds. They run it back on Cowshed with Pinocchio choosing Ghoul. Yucky. Blaine immediately runs into Pinocchio and Pinocchio tries to give him a big bear hug, but fails. Pinocchio takes no for an answer and forces his bear hug onto Blaine, getting his first injure. Blaine using life shortly after. After Blaine throws out a pallet, Pinocchio vaults over it, which I'm surprised he knows how to do, since he was trying to use his bar as a bear hug earlier. Pinocchio low-key breaks Blaine's ankles, ending Blaine's chase in 31 seconds. First round goes to Pinocchio, with Pinocchio no longer being allowed to use Ghoul, and Blaine no longer allowed to use Plague. They both go to Coal Tower, and after that loss, Blaine is now trying to lock in. Blaine chooses Dredge, which is a killer he's comfortable with, and it's not long that he gets his first hit. This terrifies Pinocchio, so he tries to hide in a corner of Shaq. Then he realizes that's not going to work, so he tries to run around the mountain, but unfortunately Blaine is just way too close, with Pinocchio's chase ending in 22 seconds. They run it back on Coal Tower with Pinocchio's first killer game, and he goes with Bubba. He knows he needs a very quick down, so he's going to try and use Bubba's chainsaw to do so. I'm surprised Pinocchio even has Bubba, considering you need to pay money to get him. Pinocchio forgets he's a killer and decides to cut down some trees with his chainsaw. After a swing and a miss, Blaine decides to take him around this awful loop. After Blaine eventually gets a pallet stun on Pinocchio, he decides to give Pinocchio a free hit, definitely by choice. After Blaine loops Pinocchio for way longer than 22 seconds, he eventually goes down, with Blaine's chase ending in 2 minutes and 26 seconds. After that game, Blaine gets his first point, but is no longer allowed to use Dredge again, while Pinocchio is no longer allowed to use Leatherface again. Going Coal Tower again, Blaine chooses Twins. Pinocchio decides to take Shaq Lip very wide, then considers taking Hatch. It doesn't take long for Pinocchio to run into Victor and get injured very early. Now you may be wondering, Blaine must be right behind Pinocchio right here, but no, he just spawns right in front of him, catching Pinocchio by surprise. Pinocchio's time being 1 minute and 52 seconds. Moving on to the next game, Pinocchio chooses Wesker for his next killer, and they both decide to go to the storehouse. Pinocchio just bought Wesker for this tournament because he was sexually attracted to Wesker. I'm sorry, this set is so dry, I'm just saying anything at this point. After playing this lip for so long, Blaine eventually gets the stun on Pinocchio. But instead of running away and making distance, he continues to play this lip. It takes Pinocchio long enough to eventually break the pallet and force Blaine to go elsewhere. After many seconds of holding W key, Blaine gets another stun, then uses his life on the pallet, allowing himself to make his way to the other side of the map. Blaine makes it back to Shaq with pallet still being up. Blaine leaving Shaq at the start of this game is really benefiting him now. Shaq pallet simply being up is already having an effect on Pinocchio, as he has no idea when Blaine is going to throw it down, or if he will. Blaine tries to bait the window, but Pinocchio doesn't fall for it and gets his first hit. Very unfortunate for Blaine for not being able to use Shaq pallet, however he finds another pallet to use and gets his stun. Blaine takes a chase into main and Pinocchio eventually gets his down, with Blaine's chase ending in 2 minutes and 51 seconds. Blaine now bringing this game back in his favour, but isn't allowed to use twins in the future matches with Pinocchio, while Pinocchio is no longer allowed to use Wesker. Running it back on Storehouse, it looks like Blaine was inspired by Pinocchio's pick in a Resident Evil character and decides to go with Nemesis. Pinocchio pallet stuns Blaine right after he misses the whip. Then he takes Blaine to this loop? Can you even call it a loop? There's just nothing here. And because of that, Blaine gets a very early hit. It seems like Pinocchio did this on purpose to not only reach his pallet, but to also get hit by a muscular man. Pretty kinky. Blaine reads Pinocchio like a book and whips him over the pallet. Pinocchio tries to make his way to Shaq, but Blaine is just way too close behind him. Pinocchio's time ended in 32 seconds. For Pinocchio's next killer game, they decide to go Pale Rose. Why is this map an option? I don't know. He decides to go Huntress for this match. If Pinocchio doesn't win this game, he is out of the tournament, and Blaine will advance. Pinocchio hits a tree because he hates team trees, and honestly, take a shot for every time I say the word pallet, because come on, what do you expect from a Dead by Daylight tournament? Blaine may have not got the pallet stomp, but at least he didn't get hit over the pallet by a hatchet. Blaine eventually makes it to another pallet and gets the stun on Pinocchio. He then uses the pallet to use his life, taking the chase to another side of the map. Blaine makes his way to another pallet and decides to wait at it, hopefully getting a stun, but he regrets waiting at this pallet as he gets hit. He makes his way to this window, but it doesn't take long for him to get hit again, and Blaine getting a chase time of 1 minute and 29 seconds. Nemesis and Huntress would have been the next two killers to be banned for one another, however Blaine has already won enough games to move on into the bracket. Now we're moving on to Lewis versus Nantes. Lewis chose to ban Ghoul and Spirit for Nantes, while Nantes chose to ban Ghoul and Nurse for Lewis. Lewis going killer first, and they both go to Cold Tower, and Lewis chooses Chucky for his first killer game. Nantes not knowing which direction Lewis is going, he kinda backs up here, not knowing that Lewis is right behind him, letting Lewis get a very early hit. Then Nantes uses his life on the Shag window. Sadly, life wasn't good enough, with Nantes' chase ending in 22 seconds. Lewis accidentally pre-drops Shag Pallet, and Nantes goes for Xenomorph for his first killer game, with them both choosing Cold Tower again. So as you watch Lewis's gameplay here, you're gonna figure out that Lewis doesn't really know the concept of a shower. And no, before you ask, he doesn't know the concept of a bath either. Nantes tries to get a tail hit over this pallet, but ends up giving Lewis more distance. After jumping up this cliff, Nantes finally gets his first hit, while Lewis tries to make his way inside of main. You can see Lewis realise how far away Nantes is from him, so he tries to break away from main to somewhere else. At this point of the chase, Lewis already knows he won the round, so he kinda just waits around for Nantes to knock him. And Lewis's chase ends in 1 minute and 19 seconds. With game 1 going to Lewis, Nantes isn't allowed to use Xenomorph again, while Lewis isn't allowed to choose Chucky again. They both vote to go on Dead Dog, and Lewis is going with Artist. You see that Nantes isn't messing around anymore, now that he has the Prestige costume on. He's not messing around, what can I say? Nantes doesn't only leave Shag very early, but also doesn't use Shag Pallet. Nantes very skillfully headbutts the corner, which allows Lewis to catch up and get his first hit on Nantes. Nantes was able to use life to make it back to Shag, but Lewis caught up quickly with the crows on Nantes. Nantes' chase ending in 34 seconds. You know, after seeing how Lewis has been playing, I'm expecting like an hour chase for this match. Because Lewis probably has the most hours out of anyone in this tournament, and he is really good at this game. Oh, early hit, oh yeah, that's over. Thankfully for Lewis, Nantes isn't allowed to use Vecna again, while Lewis isn't allowed to use Artist again, with that game going to Nantes. For Lewis's next killer game, he goes with Spirit, and they both agree to go to Cold Tower. It's weird seeing someone not only not use Windows of Opportunity, but also not use life here. Nantes bigs it for the window and Lewis barely misses a swing. However, despite making it to a pallet, it doesn't take long for Lewis to get his first hit on Nantes. He then uses the speed boost from the hit to make his way to main. Despite missing a swing, it doesn't take Lewis long to catch up to Nantes, with Nantes lasting 46 seconds. For Nantes' next killer game, he goes with Artist, and they both agree to go to Storehouse as their map. Lewis immediately pre-drops Shag Pallet and leaves Shag as soon as Nantes breaks it. You can see Lewis trying to stay out in the open in the map, as he wants to see what direction that Nantes is using his power. I'm just going to say that's what he's thinking, because I don't want to ask him to know, because you'd get a better conversation with a wall than with Lewis. Lewis doesn't really make much distance with his life, but he does make distance with this pallet stun, which gives him time to not only repel these crows but also make his way into main. A few seconds go by and Nantes eventually gets his first hit, and it doesn't take him long to get his second hit right after, with Lewis's chase being 1 minute and 25 seconds. Lewis gets his second point with that Spirit game, while Nantes isn't allowed to use Artist, just like how Lewis isn't allowed to use Spirit again. They both go Dead Dog for their next game, and Lewis is going with Night. Everybody was keep on saying that Dead Dog was a night map, and I didn't really know why everyone was saying that until this game happened. While being chased by one of Night's henchmen, Lewis breaks a wall, surprising Nantes and getting him stuck in between Knight's henchman and Lewis himself, forcing Nantes to need to take a hit. It doesn't take long for Lewis to pull this off again, getting Nantes stuck between a henchman and himself. And Nantes' time was 36 seconds. For Nantes' next killer game, he goes with Springtrap and they both go to Storehouse. Lewis takes Nantes to this loop just outside Shag, and you could tell that he really doesn't want to take any chances against Springtrap, so he pre-drops his pallet. He uses the distance he got from that pre-dropped pallet to make his way to a window to finally use his life, giving himself even more distance away from Nantes. Lewis has very nice distance from Nantes, but Nantes manages to hit a very nice axe throw. While pre-dropping this pallet, Lewis still manages to keep a very far distance from Nantes so he doesn't get this axe grab and end the chase here. Lewis is able to make his way back to Shaq to just even more time from Nantes. A few seconds later, Lewis manages to take Nantes to this jungle gym. Nantes misses the axe throw, but he's close enough to M1 Lewis and end the game. And that's Lewis' time ending in 1 minute and 51 seconds. With Lewis getting his third game, that means Lewis moves on into the bracket, knocking Nantes out, and the bans would have been Springtrap and Knight if they were to continue this set. Now let's start Giora versus Jonathan. Johnny chose to ban Pinhead and Ghoul for Giora, while Giora banned Nurse and Ghoul for Johnny. They both decide to go to Cold Tower, with Giora going killer first. Now, I don't know what Johnny was thinking here. Maybe he just felt a little bit bad for Giora and decided to give her a free hit because, you know, Jonathan's just amazing at the game and he's in the locker. And Jonathan's time was 13 seconds. For Johnny's killer game, he goes with Knight and they both decide to go back to Cold Tower. Unfortunately, there's not much to say about this game because when Johnny used his power, he lost Giora as she ran very far away from Shaq. And this was enough distance for Giora to just win the game, and Johnny already knew this, so he threw in the towel and gave Giora the point. Game 1 going to Giora. Giora is no longer allowed to use Hunters again, and Johnny isn't allowed to use Knight again. For Giora's next killer game, she's going with Deathslinger, and they both decided to go to Cowshed. Johnny, learning from his past mistakes, is taking Shaq very tight around these corners, and he dodges the shot by Giora through the window. After Johnny uses his life here, he decides to run out of Shaq and kiss this tree. Mr. Beast with Team Trades would be happy, but Giora gets her first hit because of this. And when running back into Shaq, he decides to give Giora a hug. Jonathan's final time was 42 seconds. They both run it back on Cowshed with Johnny choosing Bubba for his next killer game. Giora runs around this corner and just runs right into Johnny without even realising, almost getting downed instantly. After that last match, Johnny knows that he needs to get Giora down quite fast, which is why he chose Bubba with his chainsaw, but his first hit is actually an M1. Giora uses her life right after. It doesn't take long for Johnny to get another M1 around the corner. Giora's chase time was 29 seconds. After that surprising win for Johnny, Johnny scores his first point but isn't allowed to use Bubba again, while Giora isn't allowed to use Deathslinger. They decide to stay at Cowshed for Giora's next killer game, and Giora decides to go with Wraith. Unfortunately for Johnny, he does the same mistakes as he did in round 1, takes his corner around Shaq way too wide, and gives Giora a very easy first hit. All of a sudden, Johnny has separation anxiety and runs back to Giora for a hug. Johnny going down in 17 seconds. They both run it back on Cowshed once again, and Johnny goes with Deathslinger for his next killer game. You see Johnny trying to get a very early shot around the corner of Shaq, and you see him try to do it again with this other corner, but he just barely misses. Unfortunately for Johnny, just like his first round, he loses Giora for a long time, and he knows that at this point Giora has already won the match, so he throws in the towel and gives Giora her next point. Giora scoring her second point, she is not allowed to use Wraith again, while Johnny isn't allowed to use Deathslinger again. I don't know what the obsession with Cowshed is, but they both go to Cowshed again, with Giora choosing Legion for her next killer game. Johnny's sticking at Shaq and he goes for this window to use his life. He still plays Shaq so wide, but since he's using life, he has the distance to do that and not get hit for it. Giora's power ran out right before Johnny threw this pallet down, so she wasn't able to vault it, but she still managed to catch up with Johnny and get a free hit at this window, then hit him again at this pallet, and Johnny went down in 17 seconds. They stay at Cowshed for Johnny's next killer game, and Johnny goes with Wesker. Now, during all these tournament games, I ask everybody to mute so the two players can have full concentration in their games, because there's a lot of people who spectate and sit in the VC. But during this game, Johnny decided to share a lot of Resident Evil facts and talk about how much he loved the franchise. Which is funny because, you know, he played Leon during all of his Survivor games and now he's playing as Wesker. And during this tournament game, he decided, you know what, let's just give a lot of fun facts about Resident Evil to the entire VC who's watching his games. I just thought that was funny enough to include in the video because I think this was the only match where the two people who were going against each other were talking to each other during the whole game. Giora ends up at the wrong side of his pallet when throwing it down and gives Johnny his first hit of the chase. Johnny then tries to use Wesker's power and I honestly don't know what happened here. I don't know how he didn't get the grab there. A few seconds go by and Johnny eventually catches up to Giora again, misses the swing just barely while Giora gets his pallet down. She doesn't stay at this loop for long at all and instead she goes to this other pallet that she's already thrown down. You can see during this match that Johnny doesn't really break many pallets, and since he's playing Wesker he can vault over them, but I can't tell if it's worth it. A handful of more seconds go by and Giora has taken Johnny to a not so strong loop, but it is working in her favour. Now, unfortunately for Giora, Johnny finally realises that Wesker has a power, and he eventually gets it down. And Giora survived for 2 minutes and 16 seconds. With Giora winning this set, here's the final score between Giora and Johnny, and their last bans would have been Legion and Wesker. Next up is Luke versus myself. Luke banned Wesker and Ghoul for me, while I chose to ban Clown and Dredge for him. Me and Luke continued this weird trend of picking Cowshed all the time, and for my first killer game I decided to go with Clown, with Bamboozle that I barely used. I am not looking forward to commentating these matches because all I can see are the many mistakes I made during all of these games. After throwing many bottles like a gorilla in a zoo throwing its own crap, I finally get my first hit at main. It all goes downhill from here. After using Clown's urine bottles, I managed to catch up to Luke again, and I don't know what happened here, but this is the only time I'm going to defend myself. That should have been a hit, but it doesn't matter, I don't want to win my own tournament anyways. At this point I was low-key shivering because it felt like I was showing off a product to Dragon's Den with all these spectators watching me. Thankfully for my health, it didn't take long for the chase to end. Luke went down after 1 minute and 36 seconds. Me and Luke went to Cowshed again, and for his first killer game, he decided to go with Doctor. I planned to do the most basic thing and try and stay at Shack for as long as I can until he breaks pallet. I have no idea what I did here, like tried to dodge the shock and got hit instead. I just panicked here and used my life and just completely scrapped my idea on trying to stay at Shack. When I made it to this pallet, I instantly pre-dropped it because I know now that I'm injured, you know, one more hit and I'm done. And I'm not going to try and risk it to get a pallet stun on Luke. I genuinely thought it was over, but somehow I managed to get on the pallet on time and make Luke miss a swing. I just love pre-dropping pallets apparently, it's just my favourite pastime. Me and Luke actually have a past of playing against each other in custom games. Not many custom games, but we already had an idea on who one another played, killer wise. And I also do remember Adam calling Luke really bad at the game. His words, not mine. I eventually tried to vault this window from the other side, but get downed, which leaves my time at 1 minute and 14 seconds. After that questionable performance from me, I'm not allowed to use Clown, while Luke isn't allowed to use Doctor again, and the first game goes to Luke. For our next game, we decided to go to Storehouse with my killer pick being Chucky. Not to make any excuses for myself here, but as you can see, I don't know what I was thinking picking Chucky when the last time I played this killer hasn't been, like at this point in time, I haven't touched Chucky in quite a long time. So I forgot how to use his power and missed easy swings, which was just extremely embarrassing, but I do get my first hit quite early. It took me quite a while to find Luke again, considering that I lost him at main, but when I eventually found him, I tried to use my power right for once, and doing so, I don't know what happened here. I thought Chucky was able to fall under that, or maybe I had to click another button, or like I still don't know how this killer works. I then eventually got the down. Luke survived for 1 minute and 37 seconds. For Luke's next killer game, he went with Knight, and we both agreed to go to Dead Dog. This match took place before Nantes and Lewis's Knight game on Dead Dog, and this was when I was told that this was a Knight map, which was very unfortunate for me. I got hit very early and started pole dancing, and then I went behind Shaq pallet and waited for Luke. I missed the pallet stun and went straight to main. It really feels like deja vu after watching Lewis and Nantes on this map, also with Knight, but I did what Nantes should have done and went down his hole instead of getting sandwiched. But it didn't take long for Luke to get his last hit, which leaves my time at 1 minute and 4 seconds. While I look up the basics for Chucky again, the next game goes to Luke, with Luke not allowed to use Knight against me again, and I'm not allowed to use Chucky against him. We both chose Pale Rose, the best map in the game, and I went with Springtrap for my next killer. Not because Springtrap is good in 1v1s, it's simply because I like Five Nights at Freddy's. The main here was kinda torturous because right after breaking this pallet, it didn't take long for Luke to find another pallet, and yeah, this gameplay is quite thrilling. He tried to spin me here, but it didn't work, and I got my first hit through the window. Luke wasn't able to make much distance after that hit at all. It thankfully didn't take much time to get my last hit. Luke survived for 2 minutes and 22 seconds. We went to Cold Tower for our next game, and Luke decided to go with Blight. Luke was running out of killers that he was comfortable playing with, so Blight was quite a gamble on his part. But at the same time, it wasn't really much of a gamble when I lose my self-awareness and just walk very close to Luke and give him a very early hit for this chase. I managed to let my inner Rick come out and become a badass by just walking around this pre-dropped pallet and forcing Luke to break it to chase me. Yeah, that was very ballsy of me, I guess. I made my way back to this pallet I dropped to use my life, but I did not make any distance at all. This is against Blight, of course, so he's gonna catch up quite quickly. I would be lying if I said I wasn't clenching my cheeks at this moment, but I managed to avoid getting downed and make it to this very far away pallet. But unfortunately, I choked using this pallet and ran right into Luke. And my last time was 1 minute and 18 seconds. And with that, the last game goes to Luke, allowing him to progress further into the bracket and making me want to uninstall the game. Our bans would have been Springtrap and Blight if we were to continue this set. After that match, we have Adam versus Patrick. Adam chose to ban Chucky and Nurse for Patrick, while Patrick chose to ban Nurse and Gil for Adam. For their first game, they went with Storehouse, and Patrick is going killer first using Springtrap. By the time this is being recorded, I don't know if this has been changed or not, but Glitch Trap footsteps are a lot quieter than regular Springtrap's footsteps, making this cosmetic pay to win. Unlike many other players, Adam didn't use his life to run away from Shaq, but instead he used it to loop around Shaq much easier. It wasn't till this axe dodge that he left Shaq. Patrick gives Adam a nice surprise around his corner, getting his first hit of the chase. Adam then uses his speed to move towards main. While Adam is running for his life right now, I do want to apologise for some of these games having the cursor in the middle of the screen. The cursor is going to be in the middle of the screen for the next game or two, but after those few games the cursor is going to be tucked away in the corner of the screen. Patrick isn't recalling his axe and instead is using that extra wee speed bit to try and M1 Adam. Patrick barely misses this swing and Adam gets a stun on him on this pallet. I'm not gonna lie, I would be very mad if I was Patrick. Adam then makes his way to the next closest pallet, but this pallet is not good at all, and very unsafe, which gets him downed. Adam survived for 1 minute and 32 seconds. For the next game they ended up on Cowshed, with Adam going with Chucky for his killer game. If you ever had the question on why there's no repeat killers allowed in this tournament, this is your answer. Patrick never knew Adam was a big Chucky main, and if he was allowed to pick Chucky over and over again, it would have been a no-brainer who would win the set, with Patrick only lasting 18 seconds. With the first game going to Adam, Adam is no longer allowed to play Chucky again, while Patrick isn't allowed to play Springtrap again. Starting round 2, they go to Storehouse with Patrick choosing Vecna for his next killer pick. Now Adam and Lewis are childhood friends, however if Adam plays against Vecna the same way as Lewis plays against Vecna, then Adam isn't really in for a good game. Just like his last Survivor game, Adam uses life to run faster around Shaq, but then sort of runs into Patrick here, and at this point he already knows that Patrick has already got an early hit on him. Adam then makes his way back into Shaq with Shaq pallets still up. However, with how close Patrick is to Adam, he unfortunately can't use Shaq pallet. At least he lasted longer than Lewis. Adam survived for 52 seconds. For Adam's next killer game, they decide to go to Storehouse, and before I could even switch to Patrick's Survivor POV, Adam already gets his first hit of the chase. After that very early M1, Adam tries to go for another one but gets pallet stunned here, and you can see here that Adam's not using Nemesis's power because Adam's a wee cocky boy and he knows he could go for another M1, which he does. Patrick surviving for 32 seconds. With Adam scoring his second point, he is no longer allowed to use Nemesis again, while Patrick isn't allowed to use Vecna again. For Patrick's next killer game, they both went to Storehouse, with Patrick choosing Dredge as his next killer. As Adam was flipping around Shaq, he was going to use his life very early once again, but Patrick teleported into a wrong locker, losing a lot of time. Patrick then eventually makes his way back to Shaq, but then Adam uses Shaq pallet and leaves Shaq with his life still being usable. You see that Adam doesn't bother trying to loop around these pallets because he knows that Patrick can just teleport at the other side and get his first hit. Adam eventually and finally gets his first pallet stun on Patrick and then uses his life on the pallet he pulled down, making his way back into Shaq. That was definitely play of the game. Adam's amazing at this game and he totally didn't tell me to glaze him in this video. Adam tried to vault this window but he knew he wasn't going to vault it in time, giving Patrick his first hit of the chase. Then he wasted his time locking this locker despite Patrick being right behind him. Adam survived for 1 minute and 37 seconds. For Adam's next killer game, Dead Dog was chosen for the map and he chose Houndmaster for his next killer pick. Patrick goes pole dancing and gives Adam a very early first hit. After not being able to use Shaq pallet, Patrick makes his way to this pallet instead, dodges the dog but forgets the bigger threat behind him. And ending this set, Patrick goes down in 21 seconds. And with Adam scoring his final point, allowing him to progress into the bracket, their bans would have been Houndmaster and Dredge if they were to continue this set. Now moving on to the next sets, we have Natasha vs Aaliyah. Natasha chose to ban Springtrap and Chucky for Aaliyah, while Aaliyah chose to ban Knight and Doctor for Natasha.
And it will be Aaliyah commentating this. Thank you, Reese. Let's get straight into it. Natasha banned both of the killers that I basically only know how to use. So I choose Hag. I have no idea why I did that, because I don't know anything about her, or how to use her, or that she had traps, or anything in general. This was an embarrassing round. I chased Natasha for a very long time. She throws down pallets. Probably doesn't even need to. She could just keep running. Yep. Lose her for ages. She stuns me somehow. I don't know how I walked into that. Staying still, so calm. I get a hit on her somehow. I don't even know how that landed. Another pallet she probably didn't need to do, because I'm slow. Like I said, I don't know where I am going at all. Natasha is so calm compared to me. Let's pretend that I don't quit, and for my own mental health say that my controller died. And Natasha chose to be nurse, which is terrifying, knowing that now. She seems very skilled with nurse. I have no idea if she would agree with that or not. I'm trying everything Reese teached me. There's her first hit. Trying to loop. I've picked a very awkward palette to do that on though. I don't know why I ran away from that. Right into Natasha and I go down in 57 seconds. Point to Natasha, she can no longer use nurse again though, and I cannot use Hag. I choose Huntress. Again, never used her in my life, but she had an axe, so I thought it was cool. Anyway, trying to find Natasha. She's using Shock to confuse me, which is good because I am very new to this game at this point and did not understand Shock at all. But I try. Natasha perfectly gets away. I could have hit her, but I walked into a tree instead. Pallet? No. Yep. Stuns me. I don't know why I threw that axe then either. Here we go. One hit. Incredibly calm. Honestly, compared to me, it's amazing. And another hit. I get Natasha down in 1 minute and 44 seconds. She chooses Skull Merchant. Again, this is scary knowing now and playing more of this game. But then I did not understand what was happening to me right now. Trying to confuse her, end up playing a weird game, get hit. Try my best to get away. Again, running to awkward pallets, right into her, and I accept my fate at 43 seconds. Another point to Natasha, but she cannot use Skull Merchant, and I cannot use Huntress. Again, probably for the best. Pyramid Head, my favorite character of all time. Try and hit Natasha through Shock. Gonna tell myself that was close. Lose her for a small bit, catch her, big swing. First hit. Natasha gets away. I don't have the patience and I try a big swing again and down in 42 seconds. Houndmaster. This was a character I knew nothing about and I now have PTSD every time I hear that whistle. Missed me at first. Try and confuse her. No idea what I'm doing. Hound, there's that whistle. Hound comes out of nowhere, gets me. I'm very stressed. I jump into a locker. Let's not talk about it and move on and pretend that I skillfully got away from Natasha. Don't know what I'm doing here at the pallet. Vaulting over. There's the Hound again. I am down in 1 minute and 6 seconds. With me obviously outskilling Natasha and getting a point, I can no longer use Pyramid Head, and she can no longer use Houndmaster. Wesker, big fan of Resident Evil, but again, no idea what I am doing. His ability still confuses me to this day. It's not that difficult, I'm just a bit slow. Run into Shock, don't know why. That was a complete trap, she got away so easily. Catch up eventually, try and get her over a pallet, miss completely. She's so calm, no idea where I am even. Confused, yep. Pallet, ooh. Didn't stun me. Maybe she did. I don't know. Made a weird noise. Natasha, you're way more skilled than me. I mean, what? We're clearly on the same level. Eventually find her. Don't know why I didn't run around the other way, but it's fine. Again, she gets away, stuns me with a pallet. Easy work for Natasha. I use my ability. Somehow that worked. I'm pretty sure I did that by accident. She doesn't even need the pallet, she could just run. I am useless with this character. Very. But I get her down in a whopping 2 minutes and 17 seconds. Legion, Natasha chooses. If I knew the seriousness of this situation, I would have quit. At the very beginning, to be completely honest. I am 198% positive that Natasha let me away with a lot of this round. Appreciate you, Natasha. Don't know how she doesn't get me there. I don't know what I was trying to do. I'm very stressed, but she gets me down easy in 37 seconds.
With that win, Natasha moves on into the bracket, and their bans would have been Legion and Wesker. Moving on to the next match, we have Zaid versus Blaine. Blaine chose the ban Chuggy and Dracula for Zaid, while Zaid chose the ban Gull and Knight for Blaine. Zayd goes killer first using Singularity as his killer, and Coulter was picked for the map. Sorry for the inconsistency for this match because I spectated a bit of Zayd's Singularity gameplay and then I switched to Blaine's Survivor gameplay. After Zayd set up all of his FNAF cams around Shaq, he realizes that he lost Blaine, not knowing that he's behind this rock with one single pallet. Blaine makes some noise with the pallet, notifying Zayd that he's behind him, and shoots his snot rocket on Blaine's back to be able to teleport to Blaine and not lose him behind a rock again. After throwing down his pallet, Blaine finally comes around to using his life, which he uses to make his way to another pallet. He waits a few seconds at this pallet, which he drops, but then Zayd teleports through it, and then Blaine just does a little twirl and gets hit. Zayd uses Singularity's power very well here, doesn't give Blaine a break at all, constantly being right behind him. Blaine makes his way into main, but with Zayd being so close behind him, he knows if he drops down here, he's going to get hit either way. Blaine lived for 1 minute and 36 seconds. They go Coulter again with Blaine choosing Dredge as his killer. Thankfully, Blaine doesn't teleport in the wrong locker at the start like Patrick. A few seconds go by when Blaine eventually catches up to Zayd, and Blaine decides to close hatch, which is very interesting to do in a 1v1. Blaine sets up a 50-50 around this pallet, which he wins and gets his first hit of the chase. You see that Zayd panicked here and almost gave Blaine another hit, ending his time, but the boy came to his senses and made distance on Blaine. Zayd pre-drops his pallet and Blaine sets up a teleport from the other side. Zayd tries to bait Blaine into using it, which he doesn't fall for, and gets his last hit of the chase. Zayd lasts it for 1 minute and 54 seconds. After game 1, Blaine isn't allowed to use Dredge again, and Zayd isn't allowed to use Singularity again. That's the point for Zayd, and they stay at Coulter for their next game, with Zayd going with Pyramid Head. Straight away, Blaine tries to bait the window and spin Zayd, but gets hit very early in the chase. After being hit that early at Shaq, Blaine leaves Shaq, runs past his pallet, but Zayd thinks he's behind it, so he goes for a swing and misses. Blaine then uses the hug strategy on Pyramid Head, but it fails and he gets downed. Blaine survived for 24 seconds. They stay at Coulter for Blaine's next killer game, and Blaine chooses Artist as his next killer. Zayd immediately throws Shaq pallet and leaves Shaq, then uses his life on this window to make even further distance away from Shaq. I have no idea how this hit after watching this back, but hey, W Blaine for hitting it I guess. Zayd hovers around this pallet without even using it, then leaves this lit for some other pallet. It was easy enough to find another pallet using Windows of Opportunity. Blaine reads that Zayd is going to pull this pallet down and gets a hit with his power. You see that Zayd tried to attempt to crouch under Artist's power after he threw the pallet down, but I don't think you can do that. I should have mentioned this much earlier into these games, why Jonathan is in this match and is dead. It's because that we reached the maximum amount of spectators for this game, and since I was on console on the Discord VC, I wasn't able to screen share any of this gameplay. So since there are so many people wanting to watch Zayd and Blaine's games, we had one person go into the game as a survivor and sacrifice themselves on hook so they were able to spectate with us. I totally didn't choose this part of the chase to talk about that because there was nothing to talk about in the chase. I totally didn't do that. After a swing and a miss from Blaine, Blaine goes for another swing and eventually gets his last hit. Zayd survived for 1 minute and 51 seconds. After game 2, Zayd isn't allowed to use Pyramid Head again and Blaine isn't allowed to use Artist again. They stay at Coulter for their map choice and Zayd goes with Blight for his next killer. Blaine immediately tries to go for distance, so he runs away from Shaq straight off the bat. Blaine dodges Zayd's swing very well here and tries to throw the pallet down, but gets hit. Then he tries to do it again and gets hit again. Blaine lasted 17 seconds. For their next match, they stay at Coulter with Blaine choosing Unknown for his next killer game. Similar to what Blaine did in his last Survivor game, Zayd pre-drops Shaq pallet, then immediately leaves Shaq. Blaine knows that Zayd is waiting for him on this pallet, so he tries to use Unknown's power instead of walking through this pallet, but he misses and Zayd makes his way back to Shaq. Zayd then does a wee cheeky teabag here, because he already knows he won the set. So instead of sharing Blaine's misery during this match, I'm just going to show the end of this match. Zayd, winning the set, survived 2 minutes and 2 seconds. With the final point going to Zayd, Zayd now moves on into the bracket, and the bans would have been Blight and Unknown if they were to continue the set. After that match, we have Lewis versus Giora. Lewis banned Nurse and Spirit for Giora, while Giora banned Ghoul and Wesker for Lewis. Storehouse was the map chosen, and Lewis is going killer first, using Nurse. Lewis tries to get a very early hit here because he's greedy but misses. Lewis gets an unlucky blight there, and it doesn't take long for him to get another unlucky blight getting stuck in his crate. It doesn't take long for Lewis's bad luck to run out as he successfully blights and gets his first hit. After getting hit here, Giora tries to make her way back to Shaq as she knows Shaq pallet is still up, however Lewis is way too fat for her. Giora survived for 26 seconds. They stay at Storehouse for Giora's first killer game and Giora goes as Huntress. Lewis ain't having none of it and leaves Shaq immediately. Simply running away from Shaq straight off the bat is quite hard on Giora considering that Huntress is one of the slowest killers in the game. However, despite that, Giora manages to catch up with Lewis fairly well. Giora finds it hard to get a first hit considering Lewis crouches every time she aims. Lewis uses his life over the pallet but gets hit on the way out. He uses that life to make his way into main. Lewis tries to read which direction Giora will come from but fails. The chase went on for 1 minute and 6 seconds. Game 1 goes to Lewis while Lewis isn't allowed to use Nurse again and Giora isn't allowed to use Huntress again. Dead Dog was chosen for their next map and Lewis chose Knight for his next killer. Lewis vaults Shaq window, not only immediately catching up to Giora but also using Bamboozle on the window. However, Giora manages to throw Shaq pallet in time and escapes. She then makes it into main where she gets detected, runs up these stairs and uses her life on the upstairs window. After headbutting the locker, Giora goes the only direction she can go with this minion right behind her. Giora then runs off the balcony but immediately gets destroyed. Giora with a time of 36 seconds. Coal Tower was picked for their next map with Giora choosing Vecna for her next killer. And Lewis accidentally pre-dropped Shaq pallet before the game started, but he was always going to pre-drop it anyway, so we just moved on. Giora gets a very early hit over Shaq pallet, but at least for Lewis, this chase is going a lot longer than his last Vecna match. Now, Giora made it clear to lots of people in the VC that she's more of a survivor main than a killer main, and when she does play killer at the rare occasion, she plays Huntress. Now, this is just a theory of mine, but I think Giora went Vecna here because she knew about the Dead Dog Vecna scenario that Lewis was a part of, the 7-second famous chase, and I just want to say thank you, Lewis, because whenever people were doubting themselves in this tournament, I brought up that game to make them feel better. After lipping Giora for a handful of seconds around that lip, Lewis takes her to this other pallet just to hit her in the head and run back to the same lip. I think Giora forgot that Vecna had 4 powers here because she wasn't using any of them nor breaking the pallet. He tries to bait this pallet which Giora doesn't fall for, ending the chase. Lewis survived for 1 minute and 32 seconds. Lewis gets a second point but isn't allowed to use Knight again while Giora isn't allowed to use Vecna again. They stay at Coal Tower for Lewis's next killer game and Lewis chooses Spirit. I'm going to have a word with Lewis on what did Giora do to deserve going against a Nurse and Spirit. You see that Lewis misses a swing here, which gives Giora enough time to make her way to this pallet, then she gets a stun with it, and then makes her way back towards Shaq. A handful of seconds go by and Giora gets another pallet stun on Lewis, then decides to use her life on the pallet, making her way back to Shaq and making Lewis miss another swing. I ain't gonna lie, she is cooking Lewis pretty hard. Lewis baits Giora here, pretending to use his power when he was just standing still with it and gets his first hit. And unfortunately for Giora, it doesn't take Lewis much longer to get his second hit. Giora lasted 1 minute and 23 seconds. Now it was Giora's turn to be killer. And how did that pan out? Lewis survived for over 7 minutes. With Lewis scoring his final point, he moves on further into the bracket, with the bans being Spirit and Demogorgon if they were to continue the set. Moving on to our next match, we have Luke versus Adam. Adam banned Dredge and Knight for Luke, while Luke banned Chucky and Dracula for Adam. Luke goes killer first, choosing Clown, and they go to Coal Tower for their map. Let's just hope for Luke's sake, he didn't pick up anything from my Clown gameplay. Now both Adam and Luke has played Dead by Daylight quite often together, so they knew which killer to ban for one another. After waiting to see which direction Luke was going to come from, Adam makes his way back into Shaq, towards window just when Bamboozle runs out, allowing him to make his way to another loop. He then makes his way towards his window without realising that Luke's at the other side, then uses Clown's PP bottle to make his way around main. Adam's patience gets paid off here as he gets a pallet stun, then he uses this opportunity to make distance away from Luke, which drops the chase. Adam then finds himself in the corner with a not so safe pallet, but manages to use the pallet well and get away. He then finds himself somewhere with no window or pallet to use and goes down. Adam survived for 3 minutes and 4 seconds. For Adam's first killer game, he goes with Houndmaster and Cowshed was chosen for the map. You see Luke pre-drop Shaq pallet as he doesn't want to make it easy for Adam to bite him with Cupcake the Bulldog. After hearing Adam starting to break Shaq pallet, Luke tries to leave Shaq but doesn't realise that Adam cuts right through Shaq, getting his first hit. After using this lip for a few seconds, he then throws down the pallet, uses his life over it and goes elsewhere on the map. Luke then just barely reaches Cow Tree without getting hit by Adam, who is right behind him. You see Adam try to use the dog here to get Luke around this lip, but after his first attempt he knows that this pallet is too strong, and when he starts breaking it, Luke uses this time to run elsewhere. Adam uses Bamboozle on this window and manages to close the gap between him and Luke and ends the chase. Luke survived 1 minute and 20 seconds. After Adam winning game 1, Adam isn't allowed to use Houndmaster again, while Luke isn't allowed to use Clown again. Coal Tower was picked for their next map, and this is Luke playing as Singularity. It doesn't take Luke long at all to manage to hit his snot rocket on Adam's back, being able to teleport right behind Adam and forcing him to use his life on Shaq window. Adam doesn't let his life go to waste however, as he uses it to loop around the other side of Shaq to be able to use Shaq pallet. However, right when Adam throws down Shaq pallet, he decides to be a wee naughty boy and hide in this corner, trying to just as much time as he can, but Luke knows what he's doing, teleports behind him, and flushes Adam out of Shaq. After a handful of seconds of Adam taking Luke for a walk, he then tries to vault this other window, but Luke hits him just in time. After being hit through the window, Adam tries to look for a pallet, but with Singularity's ability to teleport through them, it doesn't last long. Adam then tries to make it to this further pallet, but the pressure of Luke's teleport finally catches up to Adam. Adam goes down after 1 minute and 31 seconds. Moving on to Adam's next killer game, he goes with Night, with Storehouse being the map chosen. You see Luke immediately leave Shaq, which is probably the best idea against Night. We've seen Giora go against Night trying to use buildings, but that ended horribly. Then as soon as Adam started to catch up, he uses his life. Luke then makes his way to this pallet, but Adam sets up one of his NPCs at the other side, forcing Luke to choose whether to get hit by Adam or the NPC. Luke gets too distracted by one of Knight's minions. I know they have names, I'm just going to call them minions because it's easier for me, but doesn't realise that Adam's right in front of him. Luke survives 1 minute and 10 seconds. After winning game 2, Adam isn't allowed to use Night again, while Luke isn't allowed to use Singularity again. Starting round 3, we got Luke going as Deathslinger on Coal Tower. Now this game sort of starts off like a Tom and Jerry chase. They just loop around Shaq until Luke manages to start the chase. However, when the chase does start, Adam immediately throws Shaq pallet down and ducks under Luke's harpoon shot. Adam goes for Shaq window, then tries to predict that Luke's going to take a shot through it, but Luke manages to get an M1 instead. Out of frustration, Adam gets full boxed by a tree, then leaves Shaq. It doesn't take long for Luke to catch up with Adam in the jungle gym. Adam then tries to make his way towards his window, but unfortunately for him, Luke gets his first and last harpoon shot. Adam goes down after 1 minute and 18 seconds. For Adam's next killer game, he goes as Springtrap, and Storehouse was the map that was chosen. Adam already throws Springtrap's axe through Shaq's window, then Luke waits for Adam to break Shaq pallet, then makes his way towards main. As Luke was running around the outside of main, Adam manages to get his first axe through on Luke, then Luke drops his very important pallet. Why is this pallet so important? Well, you're just going to have to wait a few milliseconds to find out why. Luke then does this fascinating new tech called jumping in the locker, jumping out and jumping right back in the locker. Yeah, I'm only joking, he obviously meant to vault the pallet. Adam let him go, only for a few seconds. Luke goes down under 1 minute and 10 seconds. And with Adam winning his last game, moving on to the bracket, their bans would have been Springtrap and Deathslinger if they were to continue the set. Our next match is Natasha versus Zayd. Natasha banned Singularity and Dredge, while Zayd banned Houndmaster and Skull Merchant. Zayd goes killer first, choosing Pyramid Head, and they go to Storehouse for their map. Natasha pre-drops Shack Pallet and immediately leaves Shack, but it doesn't take long for Zayd to catch up and get his first hit of the chase. She then uses his momentum after being hit to make it to this jungle gym, which she uses this window to use her life, making more distance away from Zayd. A handful of seconds go by and Zayd tries to raid Natasha around this pallet, but he misses this swing. He doesn't fall too far behind Natasha, tries to use Pyramid Head power but knows he's close enough for an M1. Natasha goes down after 46 seconds. They stay at Storehouse for their map and Natasha chooses Legion for her first killer game. Zayd waits at this window, not too far away from Shack, on Natasha to use his life and make it further into the map away from her. A few seconds go by and Zayd manages to make it to this lip with Natasha right behind him. Natasha gets her first hit around this lip, then Zayd makes his way towards main. Since Natasha can't down Zayd and her power here, they have this weird interaction under this pallet, waiting for her power to run out, then Zayd gets a pallet stun and makes his way to another lip. Zayd manages to find another lip, but can you really call this another lip? It's practically a 50-50. He drops the pallet and unfortunately for Zayd, he does not win the 50-50. Zayd survived for 1 minute and 11 seconds. With game 1 going to Zayd, Zayd is no longer allowed to use Pyramid Head while Natasha isn't allowed to use Legion again. Starting off Zayd's next killer game, he goes with Blight and Storehouse was chosen for their map again. It takes a while for something interesting to happen in this chase, so I'm going to fast forward this footage. I didn't want to cut it completely out because it did go on for a while and I didn't want to make it look like Natasha got down pretty early. The only thing that happened here is that Natasha took Zayd on a tour around the map. Zayd raids Natasha around this pallet and gets his first hit. Then she makes her way into main, with Zayd being right behind her, manages to pull this pallet down just in time to avoid getting hit again. She tries to find something to use but ends up behind these crates, then she tries to make her way towards this dropped pallet but doesn't make it in time. Natasha lasted for 1 minute and 40 seconds. Natasha goes with Doctor for her next killer game and they both stay on Storehouse for their map. Zayd tries to avoid being zapped as much as possible, so when he pre-dropped Shack Pallet he waited until Natasha broke it, then ran off. When Zayd makes it to this pallet in main, it gets more obvious what Zayd is trying to do here. He pre-drops this pallet in main and then uses his life in window, trying to prevent getting shocked as much as possible so he doesn't stay in any loop. He then makes it back to this pallet in main. Natasha misses a swing over it, giving Zayd plenty of more time to make it further into the map. After getting her last zap on Zayd, Natasha manages to get her first hit, then it doesn't take long after that she gets her last hit on Zayd in main. Zayd lasted 1 minute and 44 seconds. After scoring his second point, Zayd isn't allowed to use Blight again, while Natasha isn't allowed to use Doctor again. They stay at Storehouse once again for their map, and Zayd chooses Knight for his next killer. Natasha loops Zayd around Shack for a few seconds until she vaults this window and uses her life to run elsewhere. She waits for Zayd at this pallet, but Zayd puts one of his guards at the other side, detecting Natasha. Then she makes her way over to this pallet, then she goes back to this jungle gym, getting hit by the guard, and she doesn't know that Zayd is still at this jungle gym getting hit. Natasha went down after 1 minute and 15 seconds. Natasha wanting to show Zayd how it's done, she goes with Knight and they both stay at Storehouse once again. Unlike Natasha, Zayd doesn't stay at Shack to lip at all and decides to run off elsewhere. Then Natasha got sorta robbed here because her guard doesn't detect Zayd here. He then uses his life at main's window, but that doesn't prevent him from being detected by one of Natasha's guards. Thankfully Natasha wasn't robbed again here. Zayd is getting chased by one of her minion guard things, I don't know what they're called. Zayd tries to bait this window onto NPC, but surprisingly the NPC doesn't swing at the window. Natasha catches up with the two of them and Zayd chooses to get hit by the NPC to get a boost to make his way to this pallet. Thankfully for Zayd, this game didn't end the same way as it did for Giora. Zayd then gets body blocked by this NPC, but thankfully Natasha wasn't nearby to end the game for him. A handful of seconds go by and Natasha eventually catches up to Zayd near this jungle gym. Zayd learned not to use his pallet against Natasha from his Legion match, so he doesn't throw it down, but he gets knocked anyways. And Zayd ends the set with 1 minute and 37 seconds. With Zayd winning the night off, Zayd moves on into the bracket, with Knight being banned for Natasha and Zayd if they were to continue the set. Now moving on, we have Lewis versus Adam. Adam chose to ban Nurse and Knight for Lewis, while Lewis chose to ban Vecna and Knight for Adam. I wonder where that Vecna ban came from. Lewis goes killer first and he chooses Clown, and they go to Storehouse for their map. Now Adam and Lewis has been childhood friends for a very long time now, so it was already known that whoever won this set in the tournament would have bragging rights over the other, to say the least. After waiting for an opportunity to leave Shack, Adam eventually finds one and tries to run for this pallet, but Lewis lets him go unpunished and gets his first hit. Adam then tries to make his way to this jungle gym, but Lewis catches up with Clown's PP bottles, slows Adam down and gets his last hit. Adam survived for 33 seconds. For Adam's first killer game, he chooses Gull and they go to Cowshed for their map. Now Adam doesn't really play Konagi, but he wasn't going to pull any punches for this match against Lewis because he knows Gull can get an easy first hit just like that. Unlike many others who was playing in this tournament, Lewis doesn't leave Shack after getting hit and instead uses it to loot for a few seconds, then leave for a different loop. Now despite this loop not being that safe considering you can't really look over these hay bales to see where the killer is, Adam loses Lewis thankfully, giving Lewis a lot more time. However, when Adam eventually finds Lewis around these hay bales, it doesn't take him long to get Lewis downed. Lewis lasted 39 seconds. Lewis scores the first point, with him no longer allowed to use Clown again and Adam not allowed to use Gull again. For Lewis's next killer game, he chooses Artist and they go back to Storehouse. Adam notices that Lewis is setting up Shack with his power, so Adam leaves Shack very early into the chase. Not much to say on this part of the chase other than Adam holds W key to get to a jungle gym, then uses life to do it once again. Adam makes it to a very unsafe pallet where Lewis sets up his power from the other side, getting his first hit. Adam then uses his boost of speed from getting hit to make his way to this jungle gym, with Lewis being right behind him. But after throwing this pallet down, Lewis runs around it and gets his last hit. Adam lasted 45 seconds. Adam chooses Chucky for his next killer game and they stay at Storehouse for their map. After breaking Shack pallet, Lewis leaves Shack very early into the chase and makes his way into a jungle gym. Adam then goes into his stealth mode with Lewis waiting on this pallet for him to come around the corner. His patience pays off well as he gets a pallet stun and makes his way further into the map. Getting that pallet stun gave Lewis enough time to make it to this far away pallet right before Adam catches up to him. Lewis then throws his pallet at the wrong side and gives Adam his first hit of the chase. The pallet doesn't go to waste however as he uses his life on it. After using life, Lewis waits at this wall for Adam to lip him around, with this window being available for him any time of the chase. However, I lied because Adam has bamboozle and Lewis notices it too late. Lewis survived for 1 minute and 14 seconds. Lewis scores his second point, not allowed to use Artist again, while Adam not allowing to use Chucky again. Lewis chooses Vecna for his next killer, and they go to Dead Dog for their map. I barely finished saying that before Lewis gets his first hit with his purple skeletons. Unlike the majority of matches that were played on Dead Dog, Adam doesn't take Lewis to Saloon, but instead takes him over to the other side of the map. However, this doesn't change the outcome of Lewis holding his pallet up and getting his down. Adam went down after 22 seconds. They stay at Dead Dog for Adam's next killer game and he chooses Dracula as his next killer. It's worth mentioning that Adam and Lewis practiced for this tournament with one another for quite some time, so Adam kept Dracula a secret from Lewis for the tournament. Lots of people in this tournament did the same thing as they watched other people's matches and kept in mind which killer to ban from one another and kept their best killers for later. Unfortunately for poor wee Adam, Lewis already knows that he's won the chase and is moving on into the bracket, knocking Adam out. Lewis lasted 1 minute and 3 seconds. Lewis scoring his last point needed to move on into the bracket, and the two bans would have been Vecna and Dracula if they were to continue the set. Heading on into the finals, we have Lewis versus Zayd. To shake things up for the finals, we decided to get rid of killer bans and allow the two finalists to choose the same killer multiple times if they want to. Zayd goes killer first, choosing Pyramid Head, and they go to Coal Tower for their map. Lewis doesn't intend on lipping Zayd around Shack, so he leaves Shack straight away, going for a different pallet or window to use his life on. It doesn't take Aaliyah much longer to find a window to do exactly that, using his life over this window and making much more distance on Zaid. As Aaliyah is running in a straight line, he's trying to make his way towards main without getting hit by Zaid, with Zaid being quite far away from Aaliyah. Or so it looks, because he comes around this corner and all of a sudden he's very close and gets his first hit with Aaliyah trying to spin him. He then keeps Aaliyah around this car, which isn't a good loop at all, especially with Pyramid Head who can hit through it, and after missing a few power hits, he manages to get the down. Ending the chase, Aaliyah went down after 47 seconds. For Aaliyah's first killer game, he chooses Nurse, and Dead Dog was the map that was chosen. Now, Aaliyah kinda wet his nappy when I told him that in the finals there was going to be no killer bans, because he was scared of going against Nurse himself, but here he is playing Nurse. Zaid decides to leave this pallet behind and go for something else further away, but then Aaliyah gets his first hit of the chase. Zaid then makes his way down to this pallet, which he could have used to vault over and use his life, but I guess he didn't know how close Aaliyah was to him. Zaid went down after 29 seconds. Game 1 goes to Aaliyah. Starting round 2, Zaid is killer and he chooses Singularity and they go to Storehouse for their map. Aaliyah must be allergic to Shaq because just like his last Survivor game, he leaves straight when the chase starts. Just like the majority of Zaid's Singularity matches, he gets his snot rocket on Aaliyah's back, then Aaliyah leaves this pallet because he knows what happens next. He makes it to this pallet which he tries to get pallet stun, he doesn't get it, uses his life over it, and barely misses getting hit by Zaid. A few seconds go by, Zaid catches up to Aaliyah, then Aaliyah tries to spin Zaid, but he's not Abigail and he gets hit. With the snot ball on Aaliyah's back, Zaid is able to put constant pressure on Aaliyah, which Aaliyah handles very well throughout this game. But since Zaid can break pallets when teleporting, it doesn't leave Aaliyah much time at all to use any loop. Zaid punches his crate out of rage, then decides to do the same thing to Aaliyah and it works. Aaliyah left at 1 minute and 8 seconds. Aaliyah goes as artist for his next killer game and they go to Coal Tar for their map. Zaid takes a page out of Adam's book and leaves Shaq very early against Aaliyah's artist, as he knows that it's easy to set up artist's power around Shaq. Despite using his life, Aaliyah slows down Zaid a lot with his crows and manages to get his first hit of the chase. Zaid then starts repelling the bunch of crows around him, or should I say, the murder of crows. Thank you Google and Artist for teaching me this new lesson. But despite barely getting rid of the murder of crows, it doesn't take long for Aaliyah to get his last hit. Zaid went down after 55 seconds. Game 2 goes to Aaliyah. For Zaid's next killer game, he chooses Singularity again, and they go to Dead Dog for their map. Aaliyah actually uses Shaq for once, but when he makes it to this window, he uses his life and leaves. But that doesn't stop Zaid from using his snot rocket on Aaliyah's back, making it very easy for Zaid to catch right back up. He tries to go for this gritty play on trying to get a hit through this pallet, but Aaliyah throws it down, making Zaid miss. It takes Zaid quite a while to catch up to Aaliyah at this windmill despite being able to teleport, but this is coming from a guy who's never played Singularity in his life. I don't know how his teleport works. But Zaid is showing off his teleport as he puts some pressure on Aaliyah. Aaliyah baits his pallet and shows some Nia cake. Okay, Aaliyah, really? He then makes his way to the slip just outside a saloon, but doesn't realise how close Zaid is behind him, and Zaid gets his first hit of the chase. There's only so many different ways I could say that Zaid teleports behind Aaliyah here, but I don't have any words to describe what happens here. Aaliyah survived for over 1 minute and 35 seconds. My favourite map in the game is choosing Pale Rose, with Aaliyah choosing Nurse once again. And since this can possibly be the last game of the tournament, I am not going to commentate this game. You're going to have to watch Zaid lock in and see if he wins this match or if Aaliyah wins the tournament. And no, this isn't my excuse to not commentate another Nurse game. Enjoy. And Zaid lasted 1 minute and 4 seconds. Game 3 goes to Lewis. Thank you so much for watching this video to the very end, it really means a lot to me. As you can probably tell, I look a lot different than the intro, because this video took a few months to make. Obviously, shout out to Lewis for winning the tournament, and sure you used your earnings for something very cool. Oh yeah, he bought alcohol with his earnings, I forgot to say that. And I want to thank everybody who competed in this tournament, and of course, when I'm saying thank you, I need to thank myself because I did absolutely amazing going out of round 1. Thank you to Adam, Lewis, Abigail, Zaid, Natasha, Luke, Aaliyah, Callum, Jonathan, Giora, Blaine, Patrick and Nantis for competing in this tournament. And I wasn't glaring behind the camera because I have a list of their names on my computer. Why would you think that? And I don't think I forgot anyone's names. Oh wait, yeah, I actually forgot. Thank you Corey for getting a girl pregnant and not being able to play in this tournament. You live in our hearts. He's not dead, I don't know why I done that. My next video is going to be a Minecraft tournament, so if you're wanting to watch that, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like this video if you enjoyed it, and we'll see you there.